Everyone, Kirkaiser here, and today we're going to be talking about weapon progression from levels 1 to 70 in PSO2 NGS. There are a ton of weapons that you can obtain in this game, but unlike other MMOs or action RPGs, you don't want to just equip the highest level 1 all the time as you work your way through the game, because it could just be a waste of time, resources, and money trying to upgrade every single one. So that is why for this I'm going to be recommending different weapons at certain level points. I think it's the best time to upgrade or switch your weapon. Before we get into it though, for new players, I just want to differentiate between weapon types and weapon series. So weapon types, each class has up to 3 of them. So for Hunter, for instance, has swords, wired lances, and partisans that it can use. And then for like Ranger, it can use assault rifles and launchers. For weapon series, this is like the actual item or weapon itself. So you start off the game with a prim sword, but there's also prim rifles, prim katanas, etc., etc. These different weapon series are going to be what I'm recommending to you today in this guide, so that way, no matter what class that you're playing or what weapon type that you're using, you can take full advantage. Now though, let's take a look at our first example of a weapon that you should be using, and that's the Renaiso weapon series. This one can be earned pretty early on through the main story from a quest called Advice from Lulin 2. And as you can see here, this is the Renaisa sword, but there's Renaisas of all the other weapon types, and there's a whole bunch of different numbers or statistics attached to it. So going through these one by one, there's the level requirement, so you just need to be level 1 to equip this, the weapon type, so this is a sword icon because this is the Renaisa sword, but it'll be different between the other ones. Same with the class, so like Hunter can equip the sword and nobody else. But then there is the variance. So this is like the range of damage that you can do. So 75% to 100% and everything in between. So every time you hit, you get a random multiplier between those two numbers that will affect your damage. And we have the attack stat, which basically the higher that number is, the more damage that you do, which you can increase on a weapon by enhancing it up to its natural limit, which for this one is plus 30. But then you can what's known as limit break it up to higher and higher numbers, up to currently plus 60 for a maximum of 525 attack stat. And this natural limit is determined by the rarity of a weapon, so like higher rarity ones have a higher natural limit. Usually every 3 stars is another plus 10. Then at the bottom here, we have something special, which is called the potential. So this can be unlocked at what's known as the item lab, just like with other upgrades. But this one in particular has the dynamo unit, which gives at level 1 potency plus 16%, but that's just extra damage. And then whenever you do a successful sidestep, you get critical hit rate plus 15% for 30 seconds, which then can be upgraded more and more up to this level 5, which gives even more potency and more critical hit rate. For these potentials though, in like the early weapons, you may not want to go all the way up to the higher levels, and maybe just like level 1 to 3 until you get into a weapon that you're going to be using for a while. But also with this Renaisa series, when it's given to you, it'll start at that plus 29 enhancement, so close to this 256 or this natural limit. So that might have been a lot of information if you're a new player, but as time goes on and you play the game more and more, it'll become easier to understand. And with this upgrading, it's all done at a single location anyways, which is the item lab. So this is a NPC in each of the different hub areas, the first one being Central City at an NPC called Lavona. And here you can do a number of different things to your weapon. The first one being item enhancement. So this is where you sacrifice other weapons to enhance your current one, which increases your attack and adds what are known as augment slots. So these slots can be filled with augments using the add augments option, which is enchantments using capsules such as this one, this Dreadkeeper 3. This can increase your HP, your photon power or mana, potency floor, as well as like damage resistance and more. So more slots you have, more of these kind of things that you can put on, making your weapon better. But then there's also that limit breaking, which increases your max enhancement. So as we saw before, you have that natural limit. So if you want to go beyond that, you need to limit break by using minerals like arms refiners and more. But there's also other things where you can unlock your potential. So that's the thing that we saw down here. We have to spend a whole bunch of Meseta as well as minerals to get those different things. That's why I was saying early on, it might be good to not go too hard with that. But then there's also multi-weaponing, for instance, where this is where you put 2 weapon types together that have to be of the same weapon series. So say you have this Renaisa sword, right? But if you wanted to also use like a rifle at the same time with it, then you could smash these two together to make like a sword rifle combination if you do this multi-weapon system. Or this system is usually complicated or unnecessary for most players, as you can just have the two weapons separately instead of together in one. But you may want to do this later on in the game. But moving on to the next thing, which is great for sacrificing for item enhancement, that is Enhancement Fodder, using gold prim swords or silver prim ones. So these have these augments attached to them by default, which increases the experience earned when used as enhancement material for your different weapons. These can be earned in yellow battle dias, gold and silver bosses, as well as what is known as the geometric labyrinth. I highly recommend using just these as fodder, as using a normal weapon is just going to cost extra overall when you're trying to enhance. But if you're trying to target farm these, go for the yellow battle dias, as they give you these both, as well as the armor versions and a whole bunch of experience for your class level. And then for the last thing that you should be aware of with weapons before we get into the rest of the recommendations, that is the chance of preset skills or Fixa showing up on them. So every time you get a weapon to drop or even armor, you have a chance of a Fixa to show up on them as like an extra bonus for different things. So there's 3 different ones for weapons, one of them being Fixa Attack, which gives just straight up extra damage up to 5%, Fixa Fatale, which gives extra critical rate up to 13%, and then Fixa Termina, which gives up to 15% critical damage. These kind of vary in usefulness depending on the weapon series that you have. Usually Fixa Attack is a pretty straightforward option, but sometimes having more critical rate is better, and then sometimes even more critical damage is better if you have a whole bunch of crit rate already from the weapon itself. But these are usually not needed, except if you just want to min-max, trying to speedrun different content, or just doing content faster overall. But you definitely do not need these if you wanted to complete anything in the game. But now that that's finally out of the way, let's go look at the next weapon series that you should be using, that being the Evil Codes at level 15. This is another one that you get through the main story, a pretty early quest in the next region, Retem. So this used to start at plus 39, but I believe it now starts at plus 49. So that's a huge increase in terms of damage, as well as more augment slots. So this potential on here at level 1 gives potency plus 20%, as well as photon blast gauge charge when attacking plus 20%. And it goes up to 7% more on the potency and 20% more on the blast gauge charge. So this Photon Blast is just pretty much like an ultimate attack for any weapon, so getting that to charge faster is really nice. And because the enhancement of this weapon is so high right off the bat from earning it in the main story, you should be able to use it for quite a while. Should have no issue with battle power requirements up until like maybe the Stia region. However, I still wanted to recommend some other weapons kind of in between just in case, but the other weapon Bs aren't really necessary to use. But for the next one, there is the Relic weapon series, which is at level 31. This used to be a ultra rare drop in the Retem region when that was the main content, but now it drops quite commonly in Stia Urgent Quests for higher level players. These higher level players won't be using these, but they will be selling it in the player market or the personal shop, which that is your best bet of actually getting this weapon. But for these, they're kind of different from other weapon series, as they have 4 different potentials based off the weapon type. So for the first one is the Vigorous unit. So this gives potency, damage resistance, but also a Rusticine HP recovery plus 25%, which has a delay on it when you equip it. So equipping the weapon, you have to wait 10 seconds to get that bonus. But this is for swords, wired lances, partisan, and soaring blades. For the second one is Explosive unit. So this has a little bit less potency, but it causes area damage when you hit an enemy every like 10 seconds. So this is just like an extra explosion of damage, which is just kind of nice for DPS. This is for daggers, double saber, knuckles, and katana. For the next one, Harmonious unit, this is for all ranged weapons. This one has lower potency than the rest of the potentials, but it does give crit rate all the time, as well as a bonus crit rate when your HP is above a certain threshold, 50% at a level 5 and 80% before that. But this also might include the Gunblade weapon, which is not out yet, but it's just my guess because that's going to be a ranged weapon, so it should be part of the Harmonious unit as well. For the imbued one, this is all of the technique weapons. And for this has up to 28% potency, minus PP consumption, so it takes less to use your different PAs, as well as recovery for photon power plus 30% when attacking. So each of these are pretty unique from each other based off your weapon type, but what's interesting about this weapon series itself is that you can take advantage of the multi-weapon system, so put a sword and a bow together, for instance, and then the bow could have the vigorous unit on it instead of its usual harmonious unit, or vice versa, depending on how you multi-weapon. Onto the next weapon series, we have the Sechdal at level 45. This one is just like the Relic. This one could be skipped if the Evil Coat is good enough battle power wise, but this one can drop quite commonly throughout the Kavaris region, the third one, by basically anything, or just bought off the player market for like 1,000 Maseta. This one though is great for mobbing purposes, as it gives you generic potency, but also potency against enemies other than bosses. So great for like combat zones or exploration areas. There's just a whole bunch of tiny guys. For the next weapon, we have the Christia series at level 55. This is where I think you should start making the switch from the Evil Coat if you haven't already, as going to a 7-star weapon is a huge increase of your attack stat over everything before it. But do keep in mind that the variance also lowers from like 70 or 75% down to 50%. But that increase in attack well makes up for the difference. For where you earn this though, you can get it in the Geometric Labyrinth rank 2, which is a level 65 quest. However, you should just buy it out of the personal shop so you can get it early at that level 55 mark. For the potential, it gives you potency plus 25%, as well as photon power plus 6 when you defeat nearby enemies. So another great mobbing weapon. We then move on to the next weapon, the Rugged series at level 57. This is just another option over Christia, which can drop a whole number of different ways, but it's a little bit rare. However, because it's no longer the meta weapon, it's beginning way cheaper in the personal shop, so you might be able to do that depending on the weapon that it is. But just like the Relic weapons, these have different potentials based off the weapon type. So for the first one, it's a defensive potential, the Citadel unit, which generates up to 3 damage resistance barriers at plus 40%, and it has a cooldown of 30 seconds per barrier. However, you can reduce the cooldown by killing enemies, which reduces by 2 seconds per enemy. This is available for sword, knuckles, rifle, bow, wand, and jet boots. Then we have the gyrating unit, which gives photon power consumption minus 30% for 20 seconds when you consume 300 photon power, with a 10-second cooldown in between uses of that. And this is available for partisan, daggers, katana, launcher, rod, and harmonizer. So then for the last one, it is the Pursuit unit, which is kind of like the more DPS focused one, which gives potency, but also follow-up attacks, which will occur up to 3 times when you hit an enemy with a 5-second cooldown in between uses of that. So this is just like an extra attack that just happens for more damage. But this is available for wired lances, double saber, soaring blades, twin machine guns, talus, and maybe gunblade, as that's kind of like, I don't know, a spot that would fill versus the other two. Now for the final weapon C option, we have the Obsidia series at level 61, which used to be just a rare drop from Enhanced Enemies 60+, but now you can get it through Ordinal Tower rank 7 titles. So basically just get a good enough score in the rank 7 version, and then you'll get a weapon for each of the weapon types of your class. For this, it has a pretty balanced potential, gives potency and critical rate, and then a conditional damage resistance and natural PP recovery speed bonus for 20 seconds after a critical hit, which you get those more often because of the extra crit rate from before. But this has a 10-second cooldown in between uses of it. This one's pretty great to use, and I'd recommend just using this since you get it guaranteed, at least up until level 70, which we have the final weapon, the Neos Astrian. This weapon is currently the best in the game for all weapon types, as it has the highest attack power, as well as one of the best potentials, as it has a very high potency, plus 32%, as well as a photon blast gauge charge when attacking, plus 25%, and a photon power consumption reduction by 15% for 90 seconds after using a photon blast, which you're getting more of from the potential anyways. For how you obtain this weapon, it's actually guaranteed, just like the Obsidia one, but this time you do the Geolab R2 or rank 2 version for the first time, which gives you 5 Aegis Integra, which this you can use as a material in the Aegis Integra exchange at any item trader in any of the hub areas, which then you can use on any weapon that you may want. So I could take this 5 Integra and make it into a sword or into a katana, rifle, whatever. But if I want more beyond that, like if you want multiple of these weapons, then you'll need to do the Dark Falls Aegis Urgent Quest to have a chance of these to drop. And if you don't get the right ones, you can also exchange these weapons themselves for more Aegis Integra to exchange for the correct one. But that is the end goal. You can essentially get through the entirety of the 70 levels just using like 3 or 4 different weapon series and save a ton of resources doing so. If you want this slideshow, I'll be putting it down in the description below with all these resources attached. And if you want like other guides, like an armor guide or augment guide, I'll put them on the screen right here. But hopefully this helped you guys out. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.